Matthew chapter 20, beginning verse 1. For the kingdom of heaven, it's like a landowner who went out early in the morning to hire workers for his vineyard. He agreed to pay them a denarius for the day and sent them into his vineyard. About 9 in the morning, went out and saw others standing in the marketplace doing nothing. He told them, you also go and work in my vineyard. I will pay you whatever is right. So they went. He went out again at about noon and about 3 in the afternoon, and he did the same thing. About 5 in the afternoon, he went out and found still others standing around. He asked them, why have you been standing around here all day and doing nothing? Because no one has hired us, they answered. He said, you also go and work in my vineyard. Then the evening came, the owner of the vineyard said to his foreman, call the workers in and pay them their wages, beginning with the last one's hire and going on to the first. The workers who were hired about 5 in the afternoon came in, each received a denarius. So when those who came in who were hired first, they expected to receive more. But each one of them also received a denarius. When they received it, they began to grumble against the landowner. These who were hired last worker only 1 hour, they said, and you have made them equal to us, who has borne the burden of the work and the heat of the day. But he answered to one of them, I'm not being unfair to you, friend. You notice there's only one of them, right? Reminds you of the garden a little bit there, right? One. It takes one person to whisper in your ears that it's not fair. Did you agree to work for a denarius? Take your pay and go. I want to give the ones who was hired last the same as I gave you. Don't I have the right to do what I want with my own money? Or are you envious because I'm generous? So the last will be first, and the first will be last. The word of the Lord, amen? Please be seated. If you're visiting with us, there's a card right in front of you. Please fill that out. We'd love to get to know you a little bit. And we stand to read the scripture just out of reverence for God and in His Word. This is the most confusing parable ever. To go along with probably the most confusing religion. And the reason it's difficult for us to understand is because it's not the way we would operate. The owner of the vineyard hire a bunch of workers, some from sun up to sundown, some at 9 in the morning, 3 in the afternoon, and 5 in the afternoon. And when the day it's over, he got them all together and he says, you are going to get paid the same amount of money. The pay, it's not proportional to the amount of work, the brunt of the work, the duration, and the difficulty of the work. And I'm going to ask you an honest question. How many of you in your workplaces have seen someone who doesn't work as hard as you, who might show up late sometimes or all the time, but at the end of the day, they get the same amount of pay as you do? Raise your hand. Yeah, and then you feel a certain way. Raise your hand. A certain unfair way. Raise your hand. Okay, don't raise your hand. I get it. It's hard for us to understand this parable because that's not how we would operate. This vineyard owner paid everybody the same amount, regardless of the duration and the difficulty of the work. And I want you to listen to this religion. This is a confusing religion. There is a God. I'm speaking in third language here, or third person. There's a God who created the creation, right? Everything around it. Beautiful. Everything was perfect. Birds of the air, water, stream, fish, all kinds of stuff. And then he created the humans to enjoy this creation. And he says, go and live and move. And he even gives them the rights to procreate. I want you to go and create things. I want you to name things. I want you to plant things and watch it grow. I want you to take care of an animal and watch it grow. I want you to, do that thing with each other when you're married and then watch another human being grow. God gave them the rights to do that. So after a while, the human beings, for some reason, thought, this is not fair. All of this should belong to us. So what do? They start to push God away. We want this for ourselves. We don't want you to be involved. So this should belong to us. You know, we created this person. We raised this animal. We planted this crop. This belongs to us. So the humans begin to push God away. But soon after, the humans realize living apart from God is not all that made it out to be. So they want to be back in the garden. They want to be back with God. They longed for God to be around them again, but they just not quite figuring out how to bridge that gap. So they fall into these thoughts and ideas that they have to work really hard, or they have to do something big for this God that created this creation, that's given them, that they've been pushing it away, to love them again or to be near them again. Meanwhile, they have no idea that God has already forgiven them. Not by their good doings or their efforts, but simply because the separation between them has to be redeemed by death. So he sends his only son to die for them. But again, he is in control of all things. He created all things. So death means nothing to him. So he rose from the dead. And all the humans have to do is to allow him to be God in their lives again, which is what the humans really wanted in the first place. That is a confusing religion, right? I mean, how can this God just here, freely, grace given to you? It's hard for us to understand that concept, but that's Christianity in a nutshell. And it's hard for us to understand the idea of grace because it doesn't make sense for us. It's not how we would operate. We think that we have to, there has to be fair, and then we have to earn. If you work hard, then you earn more, and that's how we think how life should be, but that's not how God has intended for us to have a relationship with him. It's grace is a confusing, but grace it's a hard thing to understand. And then I can't help it but to say, but that's what makes grace amazing, isn't it? It's when we can't completely grasp how this whole thing works, but it works. And what I love about the parable is it teaches from relationships to finances to how to handle situations in life. But also in the parables, God reveals to us who he loves and how he loves and who he is because of his amazing grace. And that's what makes this parable so confusing. Because at first we read it, it's like the first shall be last, the last shall be first. That's not fair. These guys are getting paid the same amount of money. Forget about it. But that's what makes grace amazing. And the saddest truth to this parable is this: they all trusted God, that he would do what is right until someone whispered into their ears that it's not fair. They all trusted God until someone whispered to them, it's not fair. I don't know how long these workers, the first batch of worker, been working for this landowner, but they trusted him. No complaints. He says, hey, get up, go to work 6 in the morning. Okay, well, they're working. Because he always been fair to them. And his goodness and his fairness might have rang through the neighborhood, because the next group of worker he calls and says, hey, come work in my vineyard. And they didn't even ask how much they were getting paid. They just went because they trusted that the landowner was a fair person. And the third group, the fourth group, the 5 o'clock worker group, no complaints. They just went and worked because they know and they knew and they heard and the reputation of this landowner that he was going to be fair. Until someone, they said, and you have made him equal to us, who has been borne the burden of the work and the heat of the day. Isn't that such a basic human response that we learn from a very young age? We have 4 children, and you wouldn't believe, if you have children, the words that's coming out of their mouths, and one of the main things, if they have siblings, right, they would say this, well, that is not fair. Well, that is not fair. Why does he, Aram, who is 2 years younger than me, gets to have that, and me, Avery, the firstborn, doesn't get to have as much screen time as he? Well, because Avery, it's his birthday. Give him an extra hour. Well, that's not fair. Right, but here's the best part. Like, Avery gets to do a lot with me because he's 10, he's older. You know, I don't have to babysit him every steps of the way, right? Like the other guy. So we freely go and do things. And then Aram and Ari and maybe now even Bella. Well, that's not fair. Why does Avery get to go fishing all the time? Well, because I don't have to switch car seats. It's a very big inconvenience. But that is not fair. You know, we speak about kids and whatnot, but we do this all the time too, right? We complain to an unimaginary thing, or just showing our frustration, or even our own little thoughts, and say, well, God, life is not fair. Right? Why does that person have so much easier than me? Right? Why do they have that and I don't get to have that? Why do they somehow stumble into luck? They don't even go to church. They're not even a Christian. How do they have it so much better? How do they get the promotions and I don't? How do they, God, life is not fair. And I can see Satan whispers into our ears like he did in the garden to Eve. Take it. It's yours. Take it. Don't you want all of this? You shouldn't have to be second to that guy. You can be your own God. Take it. You can be like God. Control your own destiny. Or the way he whispered into Judas' ears and say, why are you serving this Jesus? You're the money holder, and you're just going to give it away? Take it. It's yours. You can earn and gain popularity, notoriety, and status with these guys if you just do this. Don't serve him. Serve yourself. You need money, and you need it now. I can see the way Satan tempted Jesus. Look at all this you can have. All you have to do is worship me. Look at all these people. They'll worship you. If you just worship me, you can have it all. And as your pastors, I'm not I don't get a free pass from this type of temptations. And I'll be blunt and honest with you. There are weeks where I sit in my office and I think, your church's not cool enough. You don't have people outside holding signs saying, welcome home, and smiling. By the way, I save you from the heat, by the way. That's why I don't ask you to volunteer for that. I don't want people to volunteer for that. You should be in church and listening. Your church is not big enough. You're 175, 200 strong? You need more. You need 500. You need 1,000. You need to have the multiple services. You should have a 9 o'clock, a 10 o'clock, and a 12 o'clock. Then it's going to grow, even if you only have 50 people at each services. No, because I want David Benton to go home and have his family time, because I would have him volunteer to sing all the time, 3 services. People ask me that all the time. Why don't you do that? I said, because our spouse don't work for the church. So just because the staff gets a day off doesn't mean their spouse is at home hanging out with them. If we're going to build a strong spiritual family, both people need to be home and spending life and living life together. Knew your church is not cool enough, it's not big enough. Your communion tastes terrible in the last couple weeks. I think about that too. Your AC is not working correctly, you're sweating, You're not popular on Instagram, like, oh, look at all these pastors. They have hundreds of people watching their sermons. Click, 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 click on Instagram. They went viral. You have 30 people looking at your stuff. This is the age of social media. And these are the moments, and you might experience those moments in your own life. God, it's not fair. Why don't I have this family, that family, this stuff, that stuff, this free time, the other people's free time. We think of these things all the time, and we lean into that's not fair. But these are the moments when we lean into the grace of God. And this parable teaches something very fundamentally truth for us to live by. If you can grasp this concept. For the kingdom of heaven, it's like a landowner who went out early in the morning to hire workers for his vineyard. So first and foremost, who's the landowner? God. And in verse 15 at the very end, he says, don't I have the rights to do what I want with my money? Or are you envious because I am generous? The first step to understanding grace is recognizing it belongs to God, and it is His to give. Amen? It belongs to God, and it is His to give. God owns all creation. Nothing belongs to it. This universe, there's a reason why we haven't been able to see and understand the vastness of the universe. Doesn't matter how much that we try, or how big the Hubble telescope is, or years and hundreds of years of traveling, or whatever it may be. And we still haven't understand the depth of the ocean. And it's right here in our backyard. Because it doesn't belong to us. I can't figure out how to catch a fish if I want to, because it doesn't belong to me. And the oceans, I go every day. I don't go every day, just kidding. I don't want you to think like Pastor New goes fishing every day. What are we paying for? No, it's so funny when I take Avery fishing, right? And we go through like a 5 minute of not catching anything. I see him sitting over here like this. I was like, Avery, what are you doing? He's like, I'm praying. I'm praying that we're going to catch one. The more technology we have, the more we invent, the more we increase of the knowledge around us, the more confused, and in actuality, the more in awe of how the brain functions and how vast the universe is. This is a quote from an atheist science website. Well, I can't confirm that they're atheists, but what they said is definitely not, of God. He says, how do the 100 trillion neural connections in our brains works together to create the feelings of being alive? Many great thinkers consider consciousness to be the biggest mystery, not just for the human body, but the biggest one, period. Your brain. That can not only ponder the very stars that gave us birth, they still think we came from nothing, or the stars gave us how we operate, but it's not true, right? But they says that we cannot ponder the very stars that gave us birth, but can also think about its own ability to think and wonder about its own ability to wonder. With the arrival of humans, it has been said, the universe has suddenly become conscious of itself. This truly is the greatest mystery of all. So let me paraphrase that. When I read that, I was like, wow, isn't that confusing to you guys? Or don't you get it? They're saying, we can't still figure out how can this little star that created all of us, that somehow gave us meaning and gave us thoughts and gave us the ability to think and rethink of our own existence. And they said that is the most confusing thing and the biggest mystery of it all. Well, the reason it's a mystery and it's confusing because it doesn't belong to us. God created it. Or on a much smaller scale, even ourselves or fellow humans, we can't really understand someone right next to us completely. Even our own spouse. Heck, even our own children that we created. How many guys still scratch your head and say, I don't know what that kid is thinking? All the moms like, yeah, I do that every day. And I made you. We would never completely understand creation because it doesn't belong to us, because we haven't really admit the very fact that it doesn't belong to us. It is getting harder and harder to even convey this message to the younger generation, that it doesn't belong to them and the world doesn't evolve around them. Amen? The world doesn't evolve around them. We seem to have this generation gap now. It's like we want it all and we want it now. But it's actually not really that big of a gap, because when we were younger, we thought the same thing. We want it all and we want it now. We have rights, and my rights are the only thing that matters. Something that's been really bothering me, and I'm a little angry about this, is that I would walk into a coffee shop, which is not very often because I got this awesome coffee machine at home. But when I do, this is why it surprises me. I grab something, I put it on the counter. The young lady or man would check me out, and they turn the thing around. It would be like a $3 thing, and then you have to what now? Every kiosk, you have to what? What? You have to tip. What am I tipping for? It seems like you're tipping for everything. Raise your hand if you feel that way. Isn't it awkward that you're like, I just bought a cup of coffee, which I didn't want to in the first place because I want to save money. I should have made it at home, but now I have to tip you on top of my coffee? For what? For handing me a coffee, I just grabbed something off of the counter. You know who deserves tips? Let me tell you something. I walk into O'Reilly's or Advanced Auto Part, and I said, I don't know what's wrong with my car. The window doesn't roll down. The AC's not coming on. Maybe some parts are here and whatnot. It's missing. I don't know what's wrong. Can you tell me what's wrong? I kid you not. Do some research. They walk out, look at my car. They do some things. They open my hood. They plug up a thing, telling me what's wrong with my car, and here's your window, what your window needs, and whatnot. This past week, the knob inside my door is broken off, right? Liz's best friend is visiting from college. Stand up real quick, Jen. She does this every year, and I embarrass her every year. She's still looking for a companionship, just so you know. I already warned her that I won't embarrass her like that, so just so you know. This is not off the cuff, okay? This is already planned. But she is looking, I mean. So I've been having the privilege to take the kids around with the van and whatnot, wherever they go, so her and Liz can hang out. Well, the handle inside my car door, it's broken. I didn't tell Liz that. You can't open the car from the inside. So she went to the beach, parked her car. I'm with the kids. She calls me. I'm in the middle of elders meeting on Friday. She calls, like, hey, New, how do I get out of your car? I said, you roll down the window, and you reach your hand outside, open it, and then roll the window back up, and then close the door. As simple as that. And then she says, well, your window doesn't roll down completely. I said, no, it does. You just got to keep pressing it. Like, you can't just press it and hold it. It will go down. You have to press it, it'll go down 2 inches, and you press it again, and it'll go down 2 inches. So you keep doing that, the same thing when you go back up. She said, well, what's wrong with it? I said, nothing's wrong with it. I just haven't really removed the gel, that was the tint that was on my door, where Justin, who so graciously replaced the motor, but the car door. So I take that part to O'Reilly's. I said, this is what I need. I don't know, this is what I need. So they spent about 20 minutes researching, and they got me the same exact part. I went and picked it up, installed it myself, so now I have a working door. Amen? All right, now don't clap. That's a 5-minute story. To prove a point, those people need tip. You hear what I'm saying? Not a Starbucks or the coffee guy. That has nothing to do with my sermon. That's just a little extra. I got to share my frustration with somebody. No, my point is, it's harder and harder for us to convey to people, the world doesn't revolve around you. There's a scene in the Bible where Nehemiah was a prisoner. And he says, I want to go back to my land and rebuild the temple. And the king of Persia admired the way Nehemiah worshiped and gave him the resource to go back to his land to rebuild the temple. And this is what Nehemiah said, chapter 9, verse 6. You alone are the Lord. You created the heavens, the highest heavens with all their hosts, the earth and all that is on it, the seas and all that is in them. You give life to all things, and the host of heaven worships you. Nehemiah understood God, not because he had God figured out. Nehemiah understood God because he realized how small he was. And God deserves the worship. How small he was. There's a song in 2002, graduation year. That's right, class of 2002. By Leanne Womack, I Hope You Dance. How many of you guys know that song? Yes. I hope you still stand small when you stood in front of the mountains. I hope you still see how small you are in the big scheme of things. Nehemiah understood that part. And one of the main reasons why we have a hard time following God and understanding grace is because we have lost our sense of awe and wonders for God. We're too busy focused on politics and social justice and building wealth, which is what Satan wants us to do. He wants us to lose all sensitivity for God. So then we become in this culture where God has become an extra activity, a burden, a family tradition, or simply a security blanket. That's it. And since we have lost sensitivity for God, our soul desires to feel God again. And that's why some of you are here today, or some of you might be feeling that today, that God, help me to feel you again. So this humanity, we try to find our way back to God. At its core, to think about it, the very reason we busy ourselves with meaningful work, whether it's social justice, whether volunteerism that we're involved in, and we think it's meaningful because it's in our own way, we're trying to find meaning to our existence, to prove that we're good. It's a fundamental problem for all of us of trying to find a way back to God. How can I earn an extra brownie point? How can I earn some merit, some kind of system in heaven? And we forget that the true reality is the grace of God that saves us, the grace of God that has always forgiven us. It's available to us, and it belongs to Him, and He freely gives to wherever He wants. When we take away "it's not fair" and replace it with "it belongs to God," God becomes the object of our affection and worship, the meaning to our existence and our reason to love. As I'm studying this parable, and myself included, I believe at the deepest level of the human soul, we all desire to be forgiven or to be able to forgive. And I'm convinced that can only be experienced in a gracious God. I want you to watch this.
Not many convicts consider themselves blessed, but this guy does, and for good reason. He's getting out way early.
It's going to be like being on borrowed time, because I know that I should still be in prison, because the justice system said that I should still be in prison.
In 2003, Eric Smallridge of Tallahassee, Florida, was found guilty of 2 counts DUI manslaughter. While driving at twice the legal limit for alcohol, he hit a car carrying Lisa Dixon and Megan Napier, both 20. They died instantly. He got 22 years for the crime, which sounded just about right to Renee Napier. Megan's mom.
I felt like our system had served us well and justice had been served. I definitely felt that.
But a few years later, a woman came forward and asked the judge to reduce Eric's sentence in half. She claimed Eric was truly sorry for what he'd done and deserved leniency, and the judge obliged, partly because of what she said, but mostly because of who she was.
Do you realize what a gift you gave this guy?
I do.
Renee's 180 began with the single turn of a single phrase. First at sentencing and later in a letter, Renee told Eric she'd forgiven him, even though at the time she hadn't. Not really. At trial, Eric had actually been pretty defensive and unapologetic.
I could hate him forever. And the world would tell me that I have a right to do that. But it's not going to do me any good, and it's not going to do him any good. I would grow old and bitter and angry and hateful.
Forgiveness is that important?
If you want to heal, I think, in my opinion, forgiveness is the only way to heal.
And she says it did heal her, almost as much as it healed him.
It was like a burden. It was a weight off my chest. I no longer had to hide behind this facade.
Following the forgiveness, Eric apologized repeatedly and profusely, in private and public, to the families of both girls. Eventually, Lisa's parents forgave him too, which only inspired Eric to atone even more.
Please welcome Eric Smallridge.
While still in custody, Eric agreed to speak at high schools with Renee, telling kids, as only they can, the consequences of drinking and driving.
Chains, shackles, lost hopes and dreams, broken dreams.
They both plan to continue doing this even after Eric's release.
Be safe, okay?
I'm going to go to wherever we need to go to spread this message, because I don't believe it's about us anymore.
And there's going to be healing, and there's going to be good things from here on out, you know.
This week, Eric Smallridge was released from custody into the arms of his parents. His mom so grateful, she actually hugged the guard first. It's a happy ending that would have never existed without forgiveness, because of that one powerful word. Tonight, he is free, and so is she. Steve Hartman, on the road, in Tallahassee, Florida.
As the band come forward, and I believe that at the deepest level, if you want that weight off your shoulders, the stress off of your chest, if you want to move forward and how to worship this God again, or how to feel God again, it's to be able to accept God's forgiveness in your own life. But also, if you need to forgive somebody, you need to do that. Because forgiveness in this parable, it's the grace can be given and taken only by God, because everything belongs to Him. And you know, the actual truth is this. We might say it's unfair. We might say, well, God or whatever in our lives, it's not fair. And you're right, it's not fair. But what if the role was reversed? What if you were the last worker and God says, come on in?